Have you ever had one of those nights where the universe just seems to pull the rug out from under you, and yet somehow it leads you somewhere you never expected to be? That's exactly what happened to me. One broken-down car, one unexpected hotel room, and one moment that shifted everything I thought I knew about the bond between a mother and her son. But before I get into it, I want to ask you, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or state in the comments below. I love seeing how far our little corner of the internet stretches. Now, let me take you back to that night. It started like any other long drive. Michael and I had been on the road most of the afternoon, headed back from visiting my sister in Virginia. He offered to drive. He always did, ever since he was old enough to get behind the wheel, and insisted that Mom shouldn't have to worry about anything. He's got that old-school kind of respect in him, polite, protective, just like his father used to be. Anyway, it was getting late. The sun had already dipped behind the hills, and we were somewhere in North Carolina when I heard that dreaded sputter from under the hood. The car jerked once, then started slowing down, no matter how hard Michael pressed the gas. "Something's wrong," he muttered, brows drawn tight. We coasted off the highway onto a quiet side road, the engine coughing its last breath before it went completely silent. He tried turning the key again. Nothing. Just us, in the middle of nowhere, with barely 2 bars of service. "Well," I said with a shaky laugh, trying to keep the mood light, "guess this old car's finally had enough." Michael smiled over at me, tired but calm. "We'll figure it out. Let me try and get us a tow." He stepped out into the cool night air, holding his phone high for signal. I watched him from the passenger seat, tall, broad-shouldered, confident. Even at 27, he had this quiet strength that always settled me down. Funny how roles reverse over time. There was a day when I used to cradle him through every storm. Now, he was the one who made me feel safe. After a while, he got back in, brushing the chill off his arms. "Tow truck'll take a while," he said, "but I found a motel a couple miles down the road. I'll book us a room for the night, and we'll deal with the car in the morning." I raised a brow. A motel. He smirked. "Don't worry. It has decent reviews. 2 stars. Maybe 3. I laughed despite myself. I mean, what else could we do? Sleep in the car? I'm too old for that nonsense. So we gathered our things and waited for the tow. By the time we got to the motel, it was well past 10 p.m. The place was small, a little worn around the edges, but clean. Michael had booked the last available room, only 1 bed, but he said he'd take the floor or the chair. He always did that. Put me first. I argued, of course, but deep down, I already knew we'd figure it out. The room smelled faintly of lavender air freshener and something older. Maybe dust, maybe time. A single queen bed took up most of the space, with a tiny bathroom off to the side and a small TV bolted to the wall. "Well," I said, setting down my purse, "it's no 5-star resort, but it'll do." Michael chuckled as he dropped his duffel bag near the door. "You sure you're okay sharing a room?" I gave him a look. "Michael, I've changed your diapers. I think I can handle sleeping a few feet away from you." He smiled at that, and for a moment there was this quiet pause between us. Not awkward, just still, like something unspoken had settled into the space. I sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing my calves. You know, I forgot how much road trips wear me out these days. He came over and crouched down in front of me, gently taking my foot into his hands. "You want me to rub your legs a bit? Like you used to do for me when I played football?" The gesture caught me off guard, not in a bad way, just surprising. But I nodded. Yeah, that would be nice. His hands were warm and strong, moving with slow, careful pressure. I closed my eyes, letting the tension unwind from my muscles. It wasn't just the long drive. It was everything. Years of doing everything on my own, years of being Mom before anything else. And now here he was, grown and steady, giving me a kind of care I didn't know I still needed. "You okay, Mom?" he asked softly, his voice low. "Yeah," I said, opening my eyes to look at him. "Just tired. And maybe a little grateful." He looked up at me, his hand still resting just above my ankle. There was something in his expression I hadn't seen before. Maybe it was the lighting. Maybe it was the closeness. But it felt different. Not inappropriate. Just intimate. A different kind of closeness than I'd ever felt from him. I cleared my throat, pulling my foot gently from his grasp. "You don't have to sleep on the floor, you know. We're both adults. The bed's big enough." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, okay." We both got ready for bed in quiet motions. I changed in the bathroom, slipping into my old nightshirt. Soft cotton, worn but comfortable. When I came out, he was already under the covers, turned on his side, facing away to give me privacy. I slid in beside him, careful not to make too much noise. The room was still. Only the hum of the air conditioning broke the silence. And yet I couldn't sleep. Not because I was uncomfortable, but because I could feel something. A shift. A weight I couldn't name pressing gently into the space between us. It wasn't fear. It wasn't desire. It was tenderness. Deep, unspoken tenderness that had grown over years of love and responsibility. And maybe now, it was beginning to show itself in ways I wasn't prepared for. But I wasn't afraid. I lay there, watching the soft shadows dance across the ceiling, wondering how one night in a broken-down car, one unplanned hotel room, could stir something so deep. I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew something already had. I don't know how long I lay there, staring at the ceiling and listening to the rhythmic sound of Michael's breathing. The light from the motel's neon sign outside crept in through the thin curtains, casting a faint red glow across the room. There was something calming about the moment, and something stirring underneath it. Eventually, I rolled over onto my side, slowly and carefully, just to glance at him. He was still turned away, lying near the edge of the bed, like he was trying to leave as much space for me as possible. He was always like that, respectful, mindful, protective, even when he didn't say a word. And yet I found myself wishing he'd scoop just a little closer. That thought surprised me. I've been alone for a long time. After his father and I divorced, I never really got back out there. I told myself I was too busy raising Michael, that men were too much trouble, that I didn't need anything but my son and my work. And for a while that was true. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to be seen, touched, heard. And now here I was, lying beside a grown man who used to be my little boy, and feeling things I didn't quite know how to name. I turned back toward the ceiling and shut my eyes, hoping sleep would come and carry all these confusing feelings away. But it didn't. Instead, a soft voice stirred in the dark. "You still awake?" he asked. My eyes fluttered open again. "Yeah," I whispered. He rolled over to face me, propping his head on his hand. "I keep thinking about how weird this all is. The car breaking down. The last room in the middle of nowhere. Us stuck in here together." I chuckled. Fate has a funny sense of humor. Or maybe it knows what it's doing. That made me pause. "What do you mean?" I asked, turning to look at him. Michael shrugged, his eyes meeting mine in the faint glow. "I don't know. Just, we never spend time like this anymore. Not just you and me. Not since I moved out. I guess life gets in the way," I murmured. "Maybe it shouldn't," he said softly. There was a beat of silence between us. I could hear the thud of my own heartbeat in my ears. "Mom," he said after a moment, voice low, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." He hesitated. "Do you ever get lonely?" The question hit me right in the chest. I wasn't prepared for it, for how naked it made me feel. "Yeah," I said, after a long pause. "More than I care to admit." He nodded slowly, like he understood. "Me too." We looked at each other in the dark for what felt like a full minute. The air between us was so thick with emotion, I could almost feel it brushing against my skin. It wasn't just about being alone. It was about how rare it is to find someone who understands you, someone who has seen all your flaws and still chooses to stay close. I reached out without thinking and placed my hand gently on top of his. His skin was warm. His fingers twitched slightly, but he didn't pull away. "You've always been the one person I could count on," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "even when things got hard." He nodded, his thumb brushing lightly across the back of my hand. "Same goes for you." A strange, quiet comfort settled in that moment. We weren't just mother and son anymore. We were two people who had been through a lot, who had weathered the storms of life side by side, and who, in our own ways, needed each other more than we realized. I squeezed his hand gently. "Get some rest, sweetheart. We'll figure everything out in the morning." But neither of us let go. Eventually, we both drifted off to sleep like that, our hands still touching, the space between us finally, softly closed. When I woke up the next morning, light was already streaming in through the curtains. I blinked a few times, slowly sitting up. Michael was still asleep, one arm draped across the empty space where I'd been lying. I stood quietly, stretching my arms overhead. My body felt stiff, but my chest, my heart, it felt strangely light. I padded into the bathroom, washed my face, and took a long look in the mirror. There were lines now around my mouth, around my eyes, soft reminders of all the years that had passed. But behind those tired eyes was something else. A spark. A tiny flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. When I came back out, he was just waking up. "Morning," I said softly. He rubbed his eyes and sat up slowly, smiling. "Morning." I crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. "Sleep okay?" He nodded. "Better than I have in weeks." We didn't say much after that. We packed up our things, checked out, and waited for the mechanic the motel clerk had recommended. They came, fixed the car within a couple hours, and soon we were back on the road like nothing had ever happened. But everything had changed. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way you could point to from the outside, but between us, something had shifted. He held my hand when we stopped at a diner for breakfast. Just for a moment, while we were waiting for coffee. His thumb brushed over mine, the same way it had the night before. And I didn't pull away. Whatever had started between us in that small, quiet motel room, it wasn't over. And deep down, I didn't want it to be. We drove for a while without saying much. The road unspooled ahead of us in long gray ribbons, lined with pine trees and telephone poles that disappeared into the horizon. The soft hum of the engine was the only sound for a stretch, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind that sits quietly between two people who no longer need to fill every space with words. Still, my mind was anything but quiet. I kept replaying the night before, over and over. Not because anything dramatic had happened, at least not outwardly, but because of how I felt. How he made me feel. Warm. Understood. Close. I wasn't used to that. Not from anyone. And certainly not like this. I glanced over at him. Michael had one hand on the wheel, the other resting casually on the armrest. His eyes were focused on the road, but there was a softness in his expression that hadn't been there before. Or maybe I just hadn't noticed it until now. "You okay?" he asked suddenly, catching me looking at him. "Yeah," I said quickly, then added, "just thinking." "About last night." The question caught me off guard, and I couldn't help but give a little laugh. One of those nervous, breathy ones that slip out before you can stop them. He smiled, eyes still on the road. Me too. I turned to face the window, the trees blurring past. It just felt different. "I know," he said, "but not in a bad way." There was a pause, and then I asked the question I'd been afraid to voice. "Did it bother you?" He shook his head. "No, not at all. It felt real, honest." That word settled in my chest like a stone. Honest. That's exactly what it was. Honest in a way that made me feel vulnerable, exposed, but also safe. Like we had stepped into a space where nothing had to be hidden anymore. Later that afternoon, we stopped at a scenic overlook, one of those little rest areas with wooden benches and a view of the valley below. It was peaceful, quiet, the kind of place that feels untouched by time. We sat side by side, eating sandwiches we'd grabbed from a roadside market, our shoulders barely touching. "You ever think about how fast life passes?" I asked, staring out at the sky. "All the time," he replied. I blinked and you were grown. And I'm still here, wondering when I became the woman people call ma'am at the grocery store. He chuckled. "You're still beautiful, you know." That made me freeze for a second. I turned to him slowly. "What did you just say?" He looked straight at me, not blinking. "I said you're still beautiful." My heart skipped. Actually skipped, like it hadn't in years. "Michael," I whispered, unsure what to say. "You don't hear it enough," he said. "You should." I looked away, swallowing hard. My chest felt tight, not in a painful way, but in a way that said you're feeling something deep, and you don't know where to put it. "You've always taken care of me," he continued. "Even when you were tired, even when Dad left, even when no one else was around. You kept everything going." I turned back toward him. There was something in his eyes that made my breath catch. Admiration, yes, but something more tender, more knowing. "And now?" I asked. He leaned in a little. "Now I want to take care of you." The words settled in the air between us like falling snow, quiet, soft, powerful. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My emotions were too close to the surface. Instead, I reached over and rested my hand on his. It felt natural, grounding. He didn't move. He just sat with me like that, both of us staring out at the clouds, our hands gently folded together in our laps. When we finally got back on the road, something was different. Not loud, not dramatic. Just gently changed. His hand rested near mine on the center console, and once or twice our fingers brushed. Each time it happened, neither of us flinched. By the time we got home, the sun was just beginning to set. The sky burned orange and gold, washing the driveway in warm light. He parked the car and turned to me. "Want me to stay the night? Just in case you're still feeling shaken up." I looked at him for a long time. I knew what he meant and what he didn't say out loud. "Yeah," I said softly. "I'd like that." Inside the house, everything felt the same, and yet nothing did. I made us tea while he turned on the living room lamp. We didn't sit on opposite ends of the couch like we usually did. Instead, I curled up beside him, his arm resting behind me, not quite around me, but close. We sipped in silence, the kind of silence you don't want to end. "Can I ask something?" he said, turning his head slightly. "Of course. If that night, if things had gone a little further, would that have scared you?" I didn't answer right away. I set my cup down, heart suddenly pounding. "No," I said eventually, "it wouldn't have scared me." He nodded. "Me neither." We sat like that a long time, our words hanging in the air, the space between us slowly closing in like two magnets, drawing closer without ever touching. Not yet. Eventually, I leaned against him. He wrapped his arm around my shoulder and let me rest there, my head against his chest. His heartbeat was steady. So was mine. And I thought, maybe this is how change happens. Not all at once, but slowly, gently, in the space between a motel room and a cup of tea. In the hands that never let go. That night at home, everything felt more alive. Not louder, just more present. The ticking of the kitchen clock, the faint hum of the fridge, even the soft rustle of the wind against the windows. It was as if all the little pieces of the world had gathered themselves around us, holding the quiet with care. And there we were, sitting close on the couch, bathed in amber lamplight like two people discovering something long forgotten. Michael didn't rush things. He never did. He was thoughtful in a way most men aren't, especially at that age. He stayed close, his arm still around me, fingers gently brushing my shoulder, and we didn't speak for a long while. I think we both knew words couldn't hold what was happening between us. Not entirely. I didn't feel like his mother in that moment. I felt like me, a woman, a soul, someone who had spent so many years taking care of others that she forgot what it was like to be the one cared for, seen, chosen. It felt almost foreign, but not wrong. Eventually, we both stood. The clock showed just after 11, but neither of us yawned. There was a stillness in the air, the kind that only comes before a first snowfall, or before a decision that changes everything. "I'll take the guest room," he said, picking up his bag slowly. "You don't have to," I said before I could stop myself. He paused, looked at me. "Are you sure?" There it was, that one question that carried everything with it. Not just whether he should sleep in a different room, but whether we were both ready to step fully into the space that had opened between us since the motel. Whether we could admit, without shame or confusion, that something had shifted and that it mattered. I nodded. "I don't want to be alone tonight." His bag dropped back to the floor. We moved quietly through the hallway, not sneaking, just private, respectful. The kind of silence that doesn't hide, but protects. Inside my bedroom, I turned down the blanket like I always did, the same way I had for years. Routine. Familiar. But this time, when I slid under the sheets, Michael followed, careful, slow. He lay beside me with the same steadiness he'd shown every step of this strange, unfolding path. Neither of us reached for the other at first. The distance between us was maybe a few inches, but it felt like 100 choices waiting to be made, "Can I hold you?" he asked, his voice low in the dark. I didn't answer with words. I simply moved toward him, into the space between, and let his arms wrap around me. There was nothing rushed about it, nothing confusing, just warmth, trust, connection. We lay like that for a long time, my cheek against his chest, his hand slowly brushing through my hair. And in that moment, it didn't matter what the world might think, or what the calendar said, or what labels we'd carried up until that point. All that mattered was how deeply I felt seen, cherished, safe. "Do you remember," I said softly, "when you were little and you'd sneak into my bed after a nightmare?" He chuckled, the sound rumbling in his chest beneath me. "Yeah, you'd always leave the hallway light on." I smiled into his shirt. "You'd crawl in beside me and fall asleep so fast, like just being near me made everything better." He squeezed me gently. "It still does." That made me cry. Not hard, not loud, just quiet tears that came out of nowhere. He didn't say anything, just held me tighter, his lips resting against the top of my head. "You don't have to carry everything alone anymore," he whispered. It was the first time in years someone had said that to me, and meant it. The rest of the night passed in a dream. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. What unfolded between us wasn't about passion or confusion or scandal. It was about something much deeper. The meeting of two souls who had known every version of each other, from scraped knees and spelling tests to broken hearts and heavy silences. He touched me like I was breakable, but not fragile, like I was someone he had waited his whole life to understand. And I touched him like I was finally allowed to feel. By the time morning came, the sun painted gold across the windows, and the world felt different. He was still there beside me, asleep, his hand resting lightly on my side. And I felt whole, not guilty, not unsure, just whole. Later, over breakfast, we didn't talk much about the night before. We didn't need to. There was a comfort between us now, one that didn't demand to be labeled or explained. He washed the dishes while I dried. He kissed the top of my head before leaving for work. And when he turned back at the door and smiled, just a soft smile, nothing dramatic, I knew we were okay. I didn't know where things would go from here. We never made promises, never talked about tomorrow. But we didn't have to. Because for the first time in a long, long time, I felt chosen, loved. And not for being a mother. Not for being dependable or strong or always there. But for simply being Patricia. And I knew, whatever came next, I would never forget the night the car broke down. Because everything that mattered started right then. And nothing, not even the world, could take that away.